Well, hello everyone. I'm Andrew Hollis. This is another episode of Making Waves, and thank you for joining us today. We are very proud to introduce our guest today, Ralph Cleveland. He is the president and CEO of the American Association of Blacks in Energy, otherwise known as ABE or AABE. Mr. Cleveland has 35 plus years of experience in the energy and infrastructure sector in various corporate and industry roles. And for a 10-year period, he was responsible for centralized utility operation, shared services for then Atlanta Gaslight Resources, now Southern Company Gas. Firstly, we are very grateful to have you, Mr. Cleveland.
It's great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much, man. So let's jump right into it. Well, let's start out by talking about AABE, otherwise known as ABE. So if you could just give us a little bit of a history and the purpose behind the organization AABE.
Yeah, so we were founded in the late 70s and during the Carter administration. And so that was during the energy crisis with the oil embargo and all of that. And so when the Department of Energy was formed and policies were being set relative to energy, our founders recognized that there were no people of color, particularly no blacks, who were at the table to discuss the issues. And of course, our community is amongst the most vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And so they decided, in order to address that issue, they would found this organization, now the American Association of Blacks in Energy. And so we exist to provide a voice for African Americans and other minorities in this energy space relative to policy and industry practices. And primarily, we try to be a voice for the aspirations of Blacks in this industry, number one. Number two, to understand how these policies and practices will impact our community, and to be clear about what those impacts will be. In so many instances, if there are adverse impacts, our community seems to get a disproportionate share of that. And so we want to make sure that folks understand when they're putting these policies in place, what does it mean for our community? What does it mean for the health of our community? What does it mean for the economic prosperity of our community? And so those are the things we care about. And then also we want to expose more of our community, particularly our youth, to what the opportunities might be in the energy sector. We do that through programming that things like Black Energy Awareness Month that we call BEAM. We do it through the Youth Energy Academies. We do it through scholarships. Anything that we can do to support our youth, number one, in their aspirations, and then number two, gaining an awareness and having seeing others that look like them being successful in this industry. Because we know, as I'm also a member of 100 Black Men, what they see is what they'll be. So
True.
We want to make sure that they see those who are successful in this industry. So that at least gives you a sense for who we are. And we're about 1,600 members, active members. And then we are another 3,500 members or so, what I would describe as inactive, but still in our professional network. So total of about 5,000 professionals that we can reach out to at any given point in time.
Wow, that's an extensive network right there. But I mean, I think when you kind of gave an origin story for Abe, you kind of got into one of the other aspects that I really wanted to talk about, which is what do you think, or I guess I should say, what can we do to have more minority inclusion in discussions of the economic, social, and political impact of environmental and energy policies?
So number one is to create awareness,
Mm-hmm.
and to have more of us that know and understand how this energy sector actually works. we, you know, I'm we're building a collaborative with the National Energy Foundation. They pull together educational programs in energy broadly, and so we're collaborating with them on what that might look like specifically to our community. So number one is to create that awareness and education around what the energy sector is, how does it work, and where might the opportunities be. But then it's also, when we see these practices impinging on our community, um, being able to articulate what's going on relative to our community. And so we host our national conference, which I know, Andrew, you had the opportunity to attend. And we really do try to help everyone to understand the trends in the industry, to understand what's impactful and what does it really mean, as you said, from an economic, from a social, and we host even a panel that we call Legislative Crossfire, where we talk about the politics of the day as well. And so we bring leaders in from all over to discuss the issues, and we want to make sure that we're providing that information. We try to create a pretty unique experience at that national conference. We want folks to leave encouraged, empowered, enlightened, and inspired. And so that's what we call the ABE experience. And so if you come to one of those conferences, you will understand the industry better. You'll understand the trends in the industry, and probably even beyond that, it's about developing a network. You'll meet so many people who are more than glad to reach out and connect with you relative to what this industry is all about and being supportive. And we all need, particularly as African Americans, we need a supportive network in this industry. Those are all the things that I think are really critical and important. In order for us to move things along socially, we have to have that social capital. And the very first place to build that social capital is amongst ourselves. So that anything that we can do to help facilitate that. And the other thing I would say is those 39 chapters are actively engaged and involved at the local level, at the grassroots level, with some of the issues of the day, and particularly involved with helping our youth as well. So those are all the things, sort of the thrust of some of our initiatives to make an impact in our community.
And I mean, I think that those are all relevant points. I definitely felt that energy, and especially the knowledge, institutional knowledge, when I went to the ABE National Conference. And I think it's great that you highlighted how ABE as an organization is really handling and pushing for overall minority inclusion. But to that point, I want to get your perspective, Ralph, because you come from the public, private world, and now we're actually, working for a nonprofit with ABE. But how do you believe companies like Southern Company Gas or Slater can encourage minorities into the discussions and development of energy policies, regulations, R&D technologies, and overall environmental issues?
First thing I would say is that we have to do is create, we're any of us that are in a position to, create opportunity, whether it's create the right developmental assignment, create and have jobs available, create a summer internship, create a joint venture, create with those that don't look like you. I mean, those opportunities to engage our community, because we know that in so many of these sectors in the industries, we're underrepresented. And the fact of the matter is, there needs to be spent in order to achieve the climate change goals globally, $130+ trillion. And so we can't really afford any community to be on the sideline in order for us to achieve these goals from an environmental impact standpoint, as well as we still have 1 billion people on planet Earth that don't have access to clean reliable, safe energy. And so when you know and understand the challenge, is really when you start to say no community can afford to be. You often hear left behind. It's not about being left behind. It's about us even being able to achieve the goals that are in front of us.
Mhm.
We're not going to get there without including all communities. That's just the bottom line.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And you know, I really think that kind of gets to the next point of it's great that we can bring these communities up, but I think to effectively make change in these organizations, we really need to create a pipeline for leadership from these communities. So that kind of alludes to my next point, which is how do you believe that we can create pathways for leadership for African Americans within this space outside of the traditional way to where Abe has been consistently working?
Yeah. So I'll say, y'all, anytime you're talking about leadership development, it's a two-sided coin, right? On one side of the coin, that means we have to be really engaged in the process of developing our own leadership skills. How are we preparing ourselves for when those opportunities come? You know, that old saying that, luck is when preparation meets opportunity.
Mm.
And so, how do we prepare ourselves? And the thing that I would also say relative to that, I think maybe an advantage we have that we may not recognize is that when it comes, our workforce is getting more and more diverse every day. The population as a whole is getting more and more diverse every day. And so the fact that we already know and understand a bit about how to navigate this world in a more diverse society with those who are different than us, what I would say is hone those skills. Hone your skills in managing diversity. Hone your skills in leveraging diversity to create high performance. And to that end, we at ABE, we've developed a course to impart actual skills in managing diversity. We hear a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion as an outcome that we're looking for, but it's more than just the outcome we're looking for. The question is, do we have the skills it takes to get there? And within our society today, one of the things we see is a tremendous amount of polarization.
True.
So having the skills to harmonize different viewpoints is critical if you're going to develop high performance in a workforce.
Mm. Couldn't agree more. And getting into a little bit of back to your earlier point, if you can see it, you can become it. Especially when it comes in regards to getting youth interest within our industry. Are there other ways that you believe that we can actively encourage the youth to pursue more careers within the energy industry?
Yeah. So again, so much of that is about creating exposure and awareness. Um, and that means we have to be visible. We have to be seen. I tell energy professionals all the time, particularly African Americans. I know it's hard sometimes. You just want to work your 8 hours and go home. But the fact of the matter is, if you're working in this industry, more than likely you are blessed. You have opportunity that a lot of other people don't have. But if we're going to have an impact for our community, you got to do more than just work your 8 hours and go home. We got to have everyone get engaged. We have to have everyone sort of take some level of ownership to make an impact. And so what we do matters. What we do as energy professionals, it matters. And so sometimes you have to first say that in order to even energize people to a call to action. But the call to action is now, once you're engaged, what do you do? Get
Mm.
involved, help with raising money for scholarships, help with mentoring programs, help create those internships at your place of work. Take, you know, mentor someone and bring them in and have them exposed to what you do. Take advantage of those opportunities. So if there's bring a daughter to work day and you don't have a daughter, reach out to somebody else's daughter and take them to work with you. I mean, all these are opportunities to create exposure. And then once you create exposure and you create a spark of interest, now how do you follow up with that and say, let us share more with you. Let's get you involved in a student chapter. Let's have some more programs that you can participate in, a youth energy academy that allows you to learn more. So those are some of the things that we think at least are important at the grassroots level.
Yeah, and I mean, you got him right into the next point that I kind of wanted to ask and highlighted some of the things, but I want to hear if you have any other aspects to kind of highlight on this point, and really how important do you think it is to bring community-based organizations into the overall interaction to get our youth to become interested, get internships within this field, things of that nature?
Yeah, it's absolutely critical. It really does. You have to really have an entire supportive ecosystem in order for, things to be sustainable. I'm a firm believer that, the system is perfectly designed to produce the results that we see.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're underrepresented today, if we don't have the same social opportunity, economic opportunity, if our environment, the air that we breathe is, more has more adverse health impacts than others, I'm a believer that the system is perfectly designed for that outcome. And in order for us to change it, it means we have to organize ourselves. We have to collaborate. We have to understand how all of this works in order to change the system. It's always funny to me when I hear folks that there is no systemic racism. That's just either willful ignorance or you're gaslighting me. It's one of the two. But come on, these things aren't hard to see. Just look at the outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
There's two kinds of justice. There's distributional justice and there's procedural justice. If I look at the distribution of the outcomes and I know those distribution of the outcomes are skewed, then you don't have justice. Mm-hmm. Now the question becomes, what's the procedural things? What are the policies and the practices that's leading to those outcomes? What do we need to do to change it? How do we create justice? Because where there is no justice, there is no trust.
True.
So you wonder why our community is not as trusting as everybody else in these systems. Well, it's because we're looking at the outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we go about creating a more just society, more just procedural processes so that we get more just distributional outcomes? That's one of the things I really try to emphasize. Is the best way I can say it.
No, and I mean, I think you hit the point right on the head. I mean, it's just like doing a study, right? When you do a study, you look at the outcomes to extrapolate the data and then make your overall hypothesis. I mean, you can make a generalized hypothesis, but the data is going to prove whether that hypothesis is correct or incorrect. And it's the same thing when you come and see the distributional outcomes, as you mentioned. So getting into that, or getting into a little bit of the aspect that we, at least in the energy industry and overall infrastructure space, we really have something of a silver tsunami, which is the older generation that has the knowledge base and technical skills is retiring. And we have a workforce that is coming in that is smaller than previous decades and populations, and that overall does not have that knowledge transfer that is being issued. So my question to you, Ralph, is can you think of any innovative ways that we can bring in this new young talent and then make sure to upskill them with workforce development so they can be able to hit the ground running to take advantage of these opportunities that you've highlighted within the energy sector?
Yeah, so first things we have to know and understand that we have to go about doing things in a much more structured way than we went through it. The old apprenticeship approach doesn't work. It doesn't mean that you don't mentor, that you don't sponsor others, but what I mean by that is that sort of um, time that it took to grow us into professionals, we don't have that same runway. And not only that, the way this generation learns is differently than the way we learned. And so we got to leverage technology. We got to be more structured. I tell folks all the time, like, I've got 30-something-year-old kids now. And I look at the way when they were growing up, we structured everything for them. You know, that when we were growing up, it was go outside and play. And you just had free essence play. For my kids, it was to basketball practice, to football practice, to dance rehearsal, to dance recital, to gymnastics practice, to cheerleading practice. I mean, everything was structured. And so when you have a generation who come up where everything has been planned and structured, then that means we have to be planful in the way that we help them manage through their career. We have to be planful and thoughtful in the way that we structure the learning. So it's a little bit different environment than we grew up in, and we have to make adjustments for that.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think that gets to one of the final questions that I really have today for you, Ralph. What do you think the future is generally going to look like within this sector, given your experience and kind of all the subjects that we talked about today?
So, listen, I'm excited about the future. I'm excited about the opportunity that we have. I think to the extent that we can energize and empower our community to get involved and get engaged, to the degree that we can enlighten our community and pass on the knowledge that it takes, to the extent that we can get engaged and inspire others, I think that's going to make a world of difference. And this energy sector, infrastructure more broadly, needs us.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned the billion people still left on planet Earth without affordable, reliable energy. There's still 2 billion people that are living in either no home structure or I mean the physical structure, or they're in substandard structures of living, and they're using wood to heat the home or to cook and that sort of thing. So you can imagine the internal sort of environment that they're in, just in terms of what they're breathing and that sort of thing. So
Mm-hmm.
all of these are places that we can make an impact if we understand the enormity of the challenge. And I think to the extent that we help people understand the enormity of that challenge, the more people will be inspired to get engaged, get involved, and bring their best talents and their best selves to that challenge. And so that's really what I think is like job one, is how do you create that call to action, a really clear and clarion call to action for us in our community to say, now is the time for us to get involved. Now is the time for us to learn how to make an impact, how to create value, how to protect ourselves from some of the risks. How do we gain in knowledge and understanding enough to where we can have that kind of impact on our community, whether it's economic or to your point, social or environmental, health wise, all these things that we know are have everything to do with our standard of living. And so listen, I'm all about how do we bring as many people along on this journey as we can that, can make an impact. So that's my thoughts about it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Ralph. Really appreciate it. And just want to say we appreciate your time, and I really enjoyed this conversation.
I appreciate it, Andrew. Thank you for the opportunity.